across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome. I've got a special show for you tonight, a 3-hour special totally about Meghan's new podcast. So settle down. I'm only kidding. Good evening and welcome to the Political Asylum right here on Talk. I am your host, Kevin O'Sullivan, and I'll be with you all the way to 10 o'clock. Stand by for 3 thrilling hours of news, views and topical debate. Get stuck in, get involved, get on the phone and call me on 0344 499 1000, or you can WhatsApp voice note me on the same number, and I promise to play your message out. It is Tuesday, April the 8th. Here's what's coming up. A stupefying snapshot of the Anglo-French battle to beat the migrant crisis. Spending a slice of the £500 million we gave to France to police their own borders, Macron's gendarmes have set up a ludicrously flimsy road barrier that the people smugglers can easily drive straight around. And in any case, they only close it at night. Migration Watch Chief Out Mehmet dismissed this risible roadblock as pathetic. And Reform MP Lee Anderson observed, so, free entry to the UK from dawn to dusk? Yes, that's right, Lee. As the cross-channel small boats just keep on coming, are the French ripping us off? 0344 499 1000. In other news, the high-flying cost of saving the planet as it is revealed that Crazy Ed Miliband's net zero department goons racked up more than 40,000 air miles on domestic flights in just 5 months. To get around Britain, shouldn't these climate change enforcers let the train take the strain? Or is it one rule for them and another for the rest of us? 0344 499 1000. Also tonight, the warnings Keir Starmer ignored about Labour MP Dan Norris, who was suspended from the party at the weekend after being arrested on suspicion of rape, child sex offences, child abduction and misconduct in a public office. Before taking on and beating Tory veteran Jacob Rees-Mogg in North East Somerset and Hannam, Norris was Mayor of the West of England. And I didn't know that was a job either. Where the authority is reported to have handed hundreds of thousands of pounds in compensation to alleged victims who accused the former junior minister of bullying behaviour. And yet still, he was selected as a Labour candidate in the general election. Why? 0344 499 1000. Meanwhile, Elon Musk has joined the growing throng of prominent people calling for the release of two-tier justice victim Lucy Connolly, the Tory councillor's wife, sentenced to 2 years and 7 months for posting hurty words on social media. After admitting inciting racial hatred, the 42-year-old mum's grotesquely disproportionate punishment is fast becoming the emblem of all that was so disturbingly wrong about Keir Starmer's lock-em-up approach to the summer riots that exploded in the aftermath of the Southport dance class murders. Should anyone go to prison for nasty words on Twitter? 0344 499 1000. Also tonight, more bad news on the migrant crisis front as we reveal the rising number of unaccompanied kids who have to be taken into care after crossing the channel illegally. And I'll ask why the hell the cops are making an average of 30 arrests every single day of people accused of sending offensive messages. That adds up to a shocking 12,000 a year. Is Britain turning into a thought police Stasi state? 0344 499 1000. Plus, after refusing to hold a national inquiry into the grooming gang scandal, Labour has now ditched the local inquiries it promised. Doesn't the government care about the estimated 250,000 vulnerable young white girls who were systematically groomed and raped by mobs of Muslim men of Pakistani origin? 0344 499 1000. Not forgetting the latest in the Harry psychodrama after he jetted into London for another appeal against the decision to deprive him of armed police protection when he visits Britain. The Home Office says the Prince's expensive lost legal cause is down to his, and I quote, continued failure to see the wood for the trees. Oh, and Meghan, I told you, I warned you. Meghan's new podcast about female tycoons is out, and critics are hailing it as just as boring as expected. More of that later. And finally, as Donald Trump bans his staff from dating anyone Chinese, I'll investigate exactly what it is that Team Trump despises about Keir Starmer. Because make no mistake, two-tiers insistence that the White House crew really like Britain's socialist Prime Minister is nothing but a deranged delusion. All that and so much more, so don't go anywhere. Stick with me right here, right now on Talk, the home of free speech and common sense. Let's spend Tuesday night together, and for the first 30 minutes he's back with us, I'm glad to say. He is a prolific columnist for The Sun, The Sunday Times and The Spectator. Of course, he's the great Rod Liddle. Welcome, Rod. Now,
hello, mate. Nice to see you again.
Great to see you. Now, I've got a question for you before we get to the serious stuff. Actually, this is a very serious question. Is your birthday really April Fool's Day?
Yes, it is. Of course it is. It was either going to be that or Wild Burgess Nacht. It was one of the two, wasn't it?
Yeah, because you put it on Twitter, on Facebook, and I responded, saying, well, that explains a lot. And then I thought, I wonder if he's put that on as an April Fool, but you actually were born on April the 1st.
I actually was born 3 o'clock in the morning, April the 1st, 1960.
Yeah, and yes, as I say, that explains everything. Right, let's get to business. First of all, you will have seen the story in your paper, The Sun, today. Incredible story. We gave, Rishi Sunak, what was it, 3 years ago, gave the French £500 million to patrol their own beaches in a deal that I've never understood. Why would you give another country a load of money to police its own country? But we did that. For that, we seem to have got the square root of nothing. I mean, the boats come across in their hundreds every day, pretty much, and the gendarmes tend to stand on the beach and watch these small boats go by and then wave the migrants. Good luck in Britain. Anyway, this is the latest high-tech development in the war against the migrant crisis. It's this barrier, this risible roadblock, which is in flat fields. It's about 3 kilometres west of Calais. The people smugglers, who it's supposed to stop in their tracks, can easily drive straight around it because it's very flat. But in any case, they only close it at night. They don't close it during the day. So as Lee Anderson observed, well, so that means that the smugglers are free to come from dawn until dusk. But it is a kind of emblem of the kind of pathetic nature of this alleged Anglo-French project to solve the migrant crisis. We're not getting anywhere, are we?
No, but we're not getting anywhere for a perfectly easily explicable reason, which is that it's not in France's interests to stop the migrants coming here. You know, Yvette Cooper must surely understand that. It seems that Rishi Sunak didn't. Anything which involves asking the French nicely to do something for us is going to fail. You know, It would fail under normal circumstances, but when it's greatly in their interests for it to fail, then of course it's going to fail. It just reminds me of that scene from Monty Python and the Holy Grail, where the French are standing at the top of the castle, just taunting the English from a distance. I don't blame them particularly.
No, I don't.
You know, if we're going to sort out our migrant crisis, then, you know, we have to be rigorous about it. We have to do something. Like, you know, I mean, I think it's a reasonably good idea striking up a deal with Albania and some other Balkan countries to send people to. But it won't deal with all of it. It won't deal with the asylum seekers who come in from the Middle East. And they're the ones who I think we would be most minded to stop.
But if I hear, Rod, if I hear one more two-bit backbencher, or for that matter, two-bit member of the cabinet, say, what we've got to do to solve this migrant crisis, we've got to get round the table with the French and really thrash it out, really strike a deal. As you quite rightly say, that is a completely redundant avenue to go down because the French don't want to stop them. And by the way, the mayors of those northern French towns, particularly there's one in a place called Wimereux, which is quite a nice town actually, and the mayor of Calais, they always say, well, you know, as you quite rightly say, they're not actually trying to stop them, but they say, you tell us to stop these people coming across the channel, but in the same breath, you kind of inform them that if you get across the channel, you'll give them, this is the British, 4-star hotels, 45 quid a week, free food for life, free lawyers, free dentists, free doctors, free driving lessons, free driving tests. You know, we don't exactly offer up too many deterrents, just a load of enticements.
Well, and not only that, but also indemnity from ever being sent anywhere, no matter what they've done. Indeed, it now looks as though the more heinous your crimes in this country, the more likely you are to be allowed to stay here, because the judges decide that the countries we'd send you back to would look darkly upon your behaviour.
Yeah.
So of course the French are right about this.
Yeah,
we have to do something. The migrant crisis bothers me. It doesn't bother me as much as the number of people we're letting in legally, if I'm absolutely honest. Which dwarfs.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's a very good point. It's a good point.
But if we're going to do anything, you know, Rwanda was never going to work because we don't control Rwanda. Sadly, there were days when we did, of course. Ascension Island is the SDP's policy. You send them to Ascension Island. It would cost a bit of money, but nowhere near as much as we're spending at the moment. Well, if people thought they were going to be sent to be processed on Ascension Island with no prospect of getting into this country, then they might not come. We need to deter people from coming.
Yes.
And as the French rightly say, we're not doing that. We're enticing them.
Yeah.
It's a madness.
Well, the one thing I would say about the Rwanda scheme is, like most sentient people, I harboured my doubts. Not that I'm necessarily classifying myself as sentient, but you know what I mean. But you know, there was some evidence it was beginning to act as a slight deterrent, the prospect of it. But when people say, well, the thing about the Rwanda scheme is it just didn't work. Well, it never really got the chance. It never started because that impetuous idiot, Keir Starmer, came in on day one, denounced it as a gimmick and chucked it into the bin. Then old Calamity Cooper, the Home Secretary, stood up and said, do you know how much the Tories wasted on the Rwanda scheme? £700 million. Well, in view of that, in view of the fact that £700 million worth of taxpayers' money was spent, I would suggest that Labour should have perhaps tried to give it a bit of a go, rather than just say it's a gimmick. Because ever since then, this crisis has been getting worse and worse and worse.
Yeah, but let's not kid ourselves, Kev, that the Tories were anything but catastrophic when it came to trying to handle immigration, both legal immigration, which they encouraged under Boris, you know?
Yeah.
In a great betrayal of what the British people wanted. And also, you know, they're flailing around over the migrant crisis. Now, you're absolutely right. I do remember that a camera crew was sent to film migrants who suddenly decided not to come to Britain, and when asked why they weren't coming to Britain, they said, because we don't want to go to Rwanda. So it seems as if it was a deterrent. You're quite right. But it was a very costly deterrent, and we were always at the mercy of those parasites, the human rights lawyers. Yeah. And that was the problem. So you couldn't go to Rwanda if you were gay. So you suddenly had all these 28-year-old Syrian blokes who actually like pushing gays off buildings, suddenly taking a very great interest in interior design and Mamma Mia.
And fashion.
Yeah, that's right. It's absolutely ludicrous. I mean, it's become a charade. Now, you know, somewhere like Ascension Island works because we own it. So there's no problem there about not being under British jurisdiction. But the problem will come later when the claims are are processed, and the lawyers say, well, you can't go back there because it's a nasty country. You know, the only place we can send them to is Denmark, pretty much.
Yeah, well, that'll teach them.
That will teach them, yeah. I mean, so it's root and branch. You have to reform the whole thing, beginning with the ECHR. Though I don't believe, as I've said to you before, mate, I don't believe that that's the root cause of it. I think it's the way our lefty judges are interpreting. Well, they're not. It's not
totally right. I couldn't agree with you more, Rod. I keep saying this. Yes, by all means, leave the ACHR, but unless we do something about judicial activism, these Guardian-reading judges who are conspiring against the interests of this country, if you ask me, unless we do something about them and their mindset, leaving the ECHR will not solve our problems.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And there's a whole industry built around ensuring that as many stay here as possible. And it doesn't matter what they've done. You know, one guy was kept here because he was a terrorist. Actually, because he was a terrorist. Because he said he would get short shrift in the country from which he came. You know, this goes beyond anything Lewis Carroll could have dreamt up, or even Joseph Heller, or even Swift. It has become an absurdity. And I think everyone knows it's an absurdity. I know you don't have a high opinion of them, but I think the Labour government knows it's an absurdity, if I'm honest.
Some of the more intelligent members of the Labour government, I think, are well aware. I think some of them are just some of these people in this Labour administration are frighteningly dense. But you're right. I mean, anybody with half a brain knows that what we're witnessing is, well, it's a national scandal, but it's a comedic farce. It really is.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's entirely that. But nothing will get done until there is a kind of. It's the whole of society is all of our institutions are eaten up with this stuff, with this liberal overreach, whether it be the judiciary, the ludicrous police arresting, as you said earlier, 30 people a day for saying something slightly unkind on Twitter. The social workers, the National Health Service, it's got embedded in there, and it's going to take an awful lot of work to get it removed. And I think everyone wants it removed. You know, you look at the Labour government recently. You look at Mahmood, who told the sentencing council, "We're not doing that. That will not happen." All credit to them.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. That was definitely a chink of light in a sea of darkness. But I'm not going to wax too lyrical about this government yet.
I thought you were going to tell me off for supporting David Lammy in the Sunday Times.
Well, we're going to go to break now, and I read your column in the Sunday Times at the weekend with an increasing sense of alarm. I said, "Is Rod Liddle coming to the support of David Lammy?" And then I got even more alarmed because I kind of agreed with you. So everybody, stay tuned while Rod and I praise David Lammy after these messages.
what is happening in Birmingham is a national scandal, but it's not a national story. It's not something that's dominating the headlines. Now, obviously, there's a lot of other stuff going on, as I've just touched on, that people are focusing on. But I think what for me this underlines, before we get into the broader politics, is once again that if something doesn't happen in London, it's not really perceived to be happening at all.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. I'm still talking to columnist Rod Liddle. Rod, this just in, there are reports that our population today, the population of this country, got bigger by 428. 428 Channel migrants were brought in to Dover by the Border Force water taxi service. That means that 7,000 small boat migrants have come across the Channel illegally this year. So it's all going swimmingly well. Before we move on to our friend Crazy Ed Miliband and indeed David Lammy, can I ask you a couple of questions about Donald Trump? Donald Trump has just banned his staff from dating anyone Chinese. And also there are reports, Zelensky is claiming that I think it's 6 Chinese soldiers have been fighting with the Russians inside of Ukraine. Which do you think is more newsworthy?
The first one, mate, easily. Easily. And it's a real problem for Trump supporters over here. Yeah. Especially young men. You know, nearly all the young guys I know, including my sons, originally went out with Chinese girls because they didn't stand for any of this woke rubbish. And if they're now finding out that you know they shouldn't be with, it's gonna have to be Russians. You know, they won't consort with British women of their own age anymore because they're absolutely ghastly. Whereas the Chinese are illiberal, old-fashioned, conservative, and also, this is an awful thing to say on your programme, quite fit. So this is the problem. I'm trying to speak. You
should see my producer at the moment. She's getting very nervous.
Is she looking cross?
No, nervous. I would say that would be how I would characterise her at the moment.
There were an awful. It seems to be very, very courant for young men in London who are British blokes to find their girlfriends outside the milieu that they would normally do, you know, at university and so on, and in pubs and clubs with a British girl, because they're all pansexual, bisexual, or whatever, you know, and they're having none of it, mate.
Yeah. So no more Chinese dating for the White House staff. Let's come back across the Atlantic to home territory now and talk, as we said before the break, about David Lammy. You wrote, now David Lammy has ploughed through £1.2 million worth of first and business class flights and private jets in 3 expensive months between October and December. And you point out that you don't really have a problem with. I'm kind of with you, because his job entails a lot of travel.
He's the Foreign Secretary.
Yeah, I don't want our Foreign Secretary arriving in foreign climes, you know, completely knackered after being squeezed into the back of an EasyJet plane.
No, exactly.
But what I do object to is the globe-trotting speaker Lindsay Hoyle's extraordinary £250,000 worth of all expenses paid luxury travel. And we're learning now, Rod, that Miliband's, mad Miliband's, Crazy Ed's net zero goons have racked up in just a few months £40,000 between July and December, £40,000 worth of domestic flights around Britain. Now, you know, again, I would accept these people have to travel around, but at home, in the interests of saving the planet, couldn't they let the train take the strain?
They should let the train take the strain, and if I were Ed Miliband, I'd resign over that, frankly. I think that is a resignation issue. Here is a man who is trying to force the lowest paid people in our country to pay more for their fuel, much, much more for their fuel, to buy new boilers, to buy new cars, to do all these things which he thinks will save the planet and which actually won't save the planet. And yet he is jetting across the country with his idiot advisors. It doesn't apply to him. You know, I mean, he looks more every day like Wallace from Wallace.
He really does. He really does. But this really is a resignation issue. And it should be a resignation issue because he's trying to stop us using transport in a way which damages the environment. We should be conscious. And I'm conscious. When I use transport, I don't want to damage the environment, you know. I'll take the train nearly all the time. I think it would be absurd of me to fly down from Newcastle to London. You know, of course, I agree, yeah.
And they should do the same thing. And never mind arguing, well, we needed to get there quickly. Right, then improve the bloody train services then. Yeah. Because they can't have it all ways. I genuinely think that is a resignation issue.
Yeah, he himself chalked up in the first 5 months of Labour's dreaded government after July, 23,000 air miles himself.
Yeah.
But as I just said, from July until December, his goons, people who work for the net zero department, actually spent, I've got the exact figure here, £43,644 flying around Britain. You're right. Even I, sometimes, when I'm tempted to fly to Manchester, I just think, you know what, even I think that's a bit wrong. I'll get the train.
Of course it's wrong.
Why aren't these people thinking like that?
As I say, it should be a resignation issue. There should be an edict in his department. You go by train, you know, or bike if it's nearby. You do what we're trying to tell the rest of the country to do. I think it's absolutely shocking. And just wait until another COP occurs. They'll all be out there on their private jets, you know, flying in.
So don't you love that? That's COP. What's it? COP 30? Is it in Brazil? And they're annihilating great swathes of the rainforest to build a motorway so they can get from the airport to the COP event. Unbelievable.
It would be very interesting for a young journalist, if there was a young journalist watching, add up what damage COPs have done to the environment since the very first one. Just add up all the air miles and everything. The trees ripped out in, where was it? Was it Torquay or somewhere? It was somewhere in Cornwall, I think. They ripped all the trees down.
Plymouth, they did that in Plymouth. Yeah, that's that council vandalism. It's a new syndrome, another extraordinary development in Britain's modern history. What are you going to lead on this week, Rod, do you reckon?
Well, I'm talking about freedom of speech and the abortion safe access law, which I think is being abused and is really being abused in the most hilarious manner north of the border in that land of methadone, corruption and pies. I mean, I don't know if you remember, but the Green MSP who introduced the bill, Mackay, her name is, actually called J.D. Vance an Egypt for suggesting that she was going to stop people praying in their own homes, and then admitted on a TV interview that it might be illegal for people to pray in their own homes, depending upon whom was walking past the window.
Scotland, I mean, you know, the whole country is a basket case, but Scotland, like, God knows what's going on up there.
Well, and Wales. You could add Wales into the mix
Oh,
as
my
well.
God, I forgot about Wales, but then again, I always try to forget
But
about
I
Wales.
think I might take a leaf from your book, mate, and do Miliband and his flights. You see, what I think, what it is that those civil servants are living in the real world. We need to be there at a certain time, so we'll get there whatever happens.
Yeah.
But we're not allowed to do that.
Yeah, you also,
We're not allowed.
absolutely. That worth a
We have to
mention.
live in his world of unicorns and elves. And we have to.
Don't forget, Rod, you've got to mention also, if you can find the space, because Lindsay Hoyle, let me tell you, just up.
Oh, I've done Lindsay.
Just up Hoyle. But did you see when yet again he tried to justify his luxury global travel, staying in expensive hotels, spending thousands on chauffeur-driven limos in Los Angeles, Australia, the Cayman Islands, having £300 meals, even hiring a private jet in Montserrat. He justified it by saying it's important that I travel the globe speaking truth to power. Is that what you call it?
It was magnificent, and he gets very, very chippy about all this. And you know, I covered this on my radio show on Times Radio, and his office were ringing up saying, "You don't know what Lindsay's job is like, and it's this. He must do this." Rubbish.
Yeah, I've had the same problem with his office, but they've gone quite quiet now because I think they've realised they're fighting a losing battle. The only person in that office who hasn't realised he's hopelessly lost this battle is Sir Lindsay Hoyle, who keeps explaining, no, you don't understand. He said, when they have a G7 or a G20, they also have conferences of the speakers of the parliaments. How would it look if Britain wasn't represented at them? Well, let me tell you, Lindsay, no one would give a flying toss whether you're there or not, right?
Well, I beg to differ there, Kevin, because I've always thought it very, very important that Britain strike up the greatest possible close relationship with the Cayman Islands.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm looking forward to Lindsay's next fact-finding trip to somewhere glamorous with palm trees. I guarantee you that. He never goes to Belgium or Siberia. Rod, Rod, gotta go. I look forward to your columns and your Times Radio show Saturday morning at 10 a.m. until 1 p.m. Thanks very much, mate. Columnist and broadcaster Rod Liddle there. When we come back, James Price, former Tory advisor, will be joining us with his view on a couple of other important stories of the day, so stay tuned for that.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
You are with Talk. This is where the nation comes to talk, and right now I'm going to talk to former special advisor to the Tory party, the great James Price. Hello, James.
How are you, my friend? You well?
I'm very, very well. It's good to have you on board. I wanted to talk to you especially about this first story. Now, Labour MP Dan Morris, who is the MP for North East Somerset and Hanham, he won that seat at the last election over Jacob Rees-Mogg, rather famously. Now, he's a Labour veteran, and people will have noticed at the weekend he found himself in a bit of trouble because he was arrested on suspicion of rape, child sex offences, child abduction and misconduct in a public office. He hasn't been charged, so we have to be careful here. But he was arrested at the weekend on suspicion of those very serious offences and immediately suspended from the Labour Party whip. So technically he's no longer a member of at least the Labour Parliamentary Party, so he'll be sitting in the Commons as an independent now. The point is that apparently Keir Starmer was warned before the election that Dan Norris, his job, he's an old veteran. At one point he was a junior minister for Gordon Brown. He's very much a Blairite. He's 65 years old. Before he got back into Parliament by beating Rees-Mogg, he was the mayor of the West of England. It has been reported now that Keir Starmer was informed that there were big problems there, and that in fact that authority, the West of England Authority, handed over hundreds of thousands of pounds in compensation to pay off employees who had alleged that Norris was guilty of bullying behaviour towards them. Now, as an advisor, if you had that kind of information on the table, wouldn't you have thought you wouldn't let that guy stand for election at the general election? Keir Starmer stands accused of completely ignoring these warnings. That's a bit odd, isn't it?
It's all distinctly rum, isn't it? Yeah, it's very upsetting when you see these sorts of things happen with the kind of frequency that really shocks you about elected officials. It does make you wonder whether MPs are uniquely awful people, or the job turns them into awful people, or if everybody is awful and it's just the MPs that get caught. And none of those are particularly palatable outcomes to think about on a lovely balmy Tuesday evening. I think the concerning thing is that in the moment you kind of go, well, we haven't got quite enough evidence really to get him to the police and all the rest of it, and therefore, I guess natural justice suggests we just have to let the guy go ahead. And I'm afraid I've dealt with these sorts of cases in the Conservative Party as well. And that is completely the wrong way to think about it. I think, the memory of the British public is very long, and with the internet now, you cannot get away from these sorts of things. And therefore, I think that if there's ever a hint of impropriety, you've got to come down on these things quite hard. Now, of course, there will be things that are totally unfair and things that are not true, and I'm not linking it to this specific case, but to any other one. You've got to do investigations and things, but the kind of weight of evidence, and unfortunately in politics, as I suspect in the media and in lots of other areas of where people work, you get the sense when you just sort of know if someone is a bit of a wrong 'un or not.
Yes. Yeah.
You can't make that a legal thing. That can't be something to do with the law. But if you are the Labour Party or the Conservative Party or the Reform Party, there should just be a bit of a smell test that somebody needs to pass in order to assume office. Because although I'm not one of the most left-wing people by any stretch,
I noticed that, yeah.
It's a bit of an understatement. You do get these sort of power imbalances with members of Parliament where they get lots of access to lots of places. They have a lot more power than the kind of junior people who work for them. And so you do have to take these sorts of things into consideration, because one MP doing something like this, it reflects terribly on our whole system.
Yeah, now you will know much more about this than I do, but running a major political party, but like Labour or the Tories or any of them really, I mean, it must be one hell of a job, like kind of trying to sort of shepherd a massive, great, uncontrolled juggernaut. But I do get the impression, and more of these kind of stories seem to emerge from the Labour camps, that Keir Starmer is not one of those bosses that deals in details. He doesn't seem to get involved in staffing problems. So perhaps, his approach to Labour, to the leadership, leaves something to be desired when it comes to these kind of issues.
Yeah, you raise a really good point. I think two sort of structural points there. Lots of members of parliament get elected without ever having actually been anybody's boss before. And so, Keir Starmer ran the Crime and Prosecution Service for a bit, but would have had sort of functionaries doing a lot of that stuff for him. How much direct executive management experience has he really had? Tony Blair became Prime Minister without ever having even been a junior minister. David Cameron, what did he run before the Conservative Party? Again, not a huge amount. So there is a skill that is lacking more broadly, that if somebody had, experience of running a big business, a big sports team, whatever it may be, even a small business, frankly, they'd be much better suited at the kind of management stuff that you need from these sorts of places. I think that's a big problem that you've got. And I also think there's another kind of structural problem, which is that this whole idea about the whips, you don't really have this in any other walk of life, right? People who are named after a weapon, or at the very least a kind of animal corralling.
An act of violence, yes.
Right? Yeah, exactly. You don't, down the shop in Tesco, you don't have someone called the Axe or whatever, whose job it is to make sure that
right.
you
I've never thought about that.
And they sit in this sort of weird role where it used to be, the old phrase, putting a bit of stick about, right? It used to be scaring people of, look, we've got something we know that you've done wrong, now vote with the government or else. That used to be a thing that was done, and that is clearly not acceptable in the modern age. And now they've got a sort of almost caretaker, a pastoral role, where if an MP is stressed or has, deep mental health problems or something like that, they've got to go and put a comforting arm around them, whilst also threatening them to make sure they still vote the right way. Yeah. And there's a reticence sometimes, I think, to get the police involved and in these sorts of things, and a lack of understanding about what is potentially something that should be investigated versus something that is just politics and that you can, use to cajole someone to vote. It's a very murky grey area that doesn't pop up, and as a result, you get lots of problems like this regardless of whatever party it is.
Yeah, indeed. As I say, I'm not particularly having a go at Keir Starmer. It must be a nightmare trying to control a political party. There
was a great story about Theresa May would get that one of her chief whips would come in and tell her that week's set of horrors, and she would just take her glasses off and put her head in her hand and say, God, what have they done this week? Why can't they just do their jobs? And I'd never felt more sympathy for Theresa May than then.
Do you remember the story? We must move on. But do you remember the sort of on the same tack during the expenses scandal, and somebody came in and said to Cameron, because he was the Prime Minister then, wasn't he? Or was he the leader of the opposition? No, he was the Prime Minister, and somebody came in and said, David, all of these expenses. Oh, God, what now? He said, well, one of our guys is claiming for a duck house, £4,000. And Cameron apparently went, what the F is an effing duck house? So it must be a very taxing job at times, with all due sympathy to Mr. Starmer, but things do not seem to be going well on his benches at the moment. Listen, let's go to break, James. When we come back, I want to talk to you about Lucy Connolly, the lady who's doing 2 years and 7 months for hurty words on Twitter. But also there's something I need to talk to you about, the grooming gang scandal. Something quite egregious has just cropped up. I want to get your take on that. So stick around. We'll be back in a moment.
What is happening in Birmingham is a national scandal, but it's not a national story. It's not something that's dominating the headlines. Now, obviously, there's a lot of other stuff going on, as I've just touched on, that people are focusing on. But I think what for me this underlines, before we get into the broader politics, is once again that if something doesn't happen in London, it's not really perceived to be happening at all.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. I'm still talking to the former special advisor to the Tories, James Price. James, before we get to Lucy Connolly, I think that's an important issue to discuss. This has literally just cropped up in the last hour or so, and I think it's a disgrace. Labour has slipped this in on the last day of Parliament, right? And what they've slipped in, do you remember when there was the furore, we were all demanding a national inquiry into the grooming gang scandal, the rape gang scandal, and Labour sort of said, no. But they offered the nation as a SAP. What we will do is we'll have 5 local inquiries in the worst hit areas. A lot of people say, well, what do you mean by that? 250,000 vulnerable white young girls. That's the estimate of how many young girls were raped or sexually assaulted and groomed by these predominantly Muslim Pakistani origin men. Now, what they've done just now, literally, they've dropped even the local inquiries. They set aside £5 million for these 5 local inquiries, but now Jess Phillips, the safeguarding minister, has just announced it's all over. We will use that money to back locally led work on grooming gangs. So this government has totally abandoned the victims of the grooming gangs and abandoned what this nation wanted. People, we're all a bit suspicious about, a national inquiry here, a national inquiry there. Too many national inquiries. But we wanted one here. They said no. Many of us thought it's because they're frightened about the Muslim vote. They didn't want to upset the Muslim community. And now they've abandoned even the local ones. And they've slipped this in just as Parliament's closing. That's a disgrace, isn't it?
You may have to calm me down at some point in this, because I've been following this for a few hours now, and it has made my blood boil beyond belief. This is the Labour Party saying that not only will it refuse to do, as you say, a national inquiry, despite huge amounts of evidence that these events were not just happening in the past, by the way, these predominantly Pakistani Muslim rape gangs, they're still going on in many cases. And many victims are still having to live in the same towns and see their perpetrators, the people who did these unspeakable acts to them. These things are still happening. And there was one sort of partial investigation where people didn't bother to collaborate with it, and therefore it didn't really get very far. Then you've seen a bunch of cases where some people have been taken to trial, but the court transcripts are very expensive. For some incredibly mad reason, costs a huge amount of money. We could just, obviously with AI now, get these court transcripts knocked up and sent out very quickly. But in a way, I'm almost glad that they are so prohibitively expensive they can't come out, because what they contain, what some of these heinous acts are, things that I didn't think possible to imagine in my worst nightmares, have happened and are still happening in this country. I'm not going to say what they are, but there's a rising star of the Conservative Party called Katie Lamb, Member of Parliament, who responded to Jess Phillips, who you just mentioned there, and she read out some of the horrible acts that happened. And this is the first time that any of these things have been said, because the transcripts have only just been paid for from some of the court cases. And they are, as I say, stuff out of your worst nightmares, or hopefully worse than you can possibly imagine. And yet the Labour Party will not have a national inquiry in this. And as you say, has now scrapped even the local schemes. Now, I thought that some people saying that that this was because Labour Party local officials or local councillors or something might be implicated. That to me sounded like a wild conspiracy theory until today. I can see no reason why Labour would not want to have an inquiry into this unless their own people are implicated, or because they know that what has gone on in towns and cities, the length and breadth of our once great country, is so horrifying and so evil that it would lead to mass levels of civil unrest, because that's how disgraceful these acts have been. And the fact that we're still just now, I say we, the government, the state, is trying to brush it under the carpet. No, we need to expose the horrors of what's happened and what is still happening
And
here.
Jess Phillips introduced this last-minute announcement into Parliament with 45 minutes' notice, just as Parliament's closing for the break. She is the Minister for Safeguarding and Violence Against Women and Girls. I say shame on her, and shame on the Labour Party for this. This is a disgrace. To play political chicanery, political tricks with an issue like this, the nation deserves better than this, and they're going to rue the day they do this. They really are. We're coming back.
And very, very briefly on it, of course, her constituency has a very high Muslim percentage of voters in it. And at the general election last year, Jess Phillips almost lost her seat, and she was heckled and harassed by people at the count. Yeah. But she was too frightened, perhaps understandably so, to call out who and what and why these people were having a pop at her. She just described them as, quote, men, right, as if it was all men. And then when the rioting kicked off and the counter-rioting kicked off last summer, she, as a newly minted Home Office minister, was seen to try to defend the creation of a set of ad hoc Muslim militias who were wandering around the streets in Birmingham looking to pick a fight against a kind of far-right outing who didn't actually exist in the first place. There's something very, very deep and sick. And Kevin, you're exactly right. They will rue the day, Labour, where they try to play politics with something as important and disgraceful as this.
Yeah, and let's not beat about the bush. The reason they're doing this is if they had a big inquiry into the Muslim gangs, it may offend certain noisy elements of the Muslim community, and Labour are terrified of that because they need and they want the Muslim vote, potentially 4 million at the next election. And that's what this is all about. And it, as you say, James, as we both agree, it's scandalous to play politics with an issue like this. There are some things that should be more important than whether or not you win an election. They really are. So, as we both agree, Labour will regret this. I'm certain of it. Now, very quickly now, we haven't got long now, Elon Musk has joined the growing throng of prominent people calling for Lucy Connolly to be released. Lucy Connolly is the 42-year-old mum. She's got a 12-year-old daughter. She was sentenced. She's the wife of a Tory councillor, you know, that kind of classic, what the Daily Mail will call a loving middle-class mum, but she pretty much is. She had a moment of madness during the summer riots. She tweeted something that was stupid. She said mass deportation set fire to asylum seeker hotels. If that makes me a racist, so be it. I don't care, you know, or something like that. She got 2 years and 7 months for that. This woman is no threat to the community, to the people whatsoever. She's appealing. She gets rejected for her appeal. Her latest appeal is, could you just please let me out on licence, temporary licence, to see my 12-year-old daughter? You know, and they say no. 2 years and 7 months for hurty words on X. This is the epicentre of all that is wrong, or all that was wrong, with Keir Starmer's lock-em-up approach to the summer riots, just banging anyone in prison. And no one should ever go to jail in this country for something they write on social media. Would you agree?
I think I do, actually. I think this has kind of proven it. I used to think that there was reasonable cause for when people, incitement and things like that. I think they're definitely that if you say, let's all go out and kill so-and-so today, right, I do still think that shouldn't be allowed, and that is an incitement to violence, and therefore there's a fair enough rule around that. But this case has shown that needs some kind of either tweaking, or it needs a judge to be very sensible about these things. This woman clearly didn't actually pose any great threat to anybody, and she clearly didn't actually think through what she was saying. It was a moment of anger and all the rest of it. A slap on the wrist, a suspended sentence, all these things are toolkits that the judiciary could have used against her. But the Keir Starmer and the judiciary and all the rest wanted to make an example of somebody who's otherwise been a perfectly nice, caring, law-abiding person. And to not even let her see her daughter at a time when, prisons are full of, and so full actually that we can't get violent criminals into there. This woman is taking up a space, is madness. Just last week, 2 people who were accused of setting up a Hezbollah terrorist cell inside the UK were released on bail. Yeah. Right? And this woman is in prison for saying some hurty words on Facebook. That's how you know we have a 2-tier justice system. And not just that, someone like Robert Jenrick in the Tory party highlighted the nature of us having a 2-tier system because it was, until his intervention, going to become the law of the land that people of ethnic minorities would be treated less harshly. So maybe Lucy Connolly, if she were black or something else, she wouldn't be facing such a stiff sentence. And that's the 2-tier justice system we've got in Britain right now. It's a disgrace.
There was another lady called Julie Sweeney. She went to jail as well for nasty words during the riots. She talked about blowing up the adults inside the home. None of this is nice, and we're not condoning it. But this was a woman who lived in the countryside in some farm, and about 7 people read her post. It's ridiculous to send these people to jail. As you say, this is the epicenter of our 2-tier justice crisis. James, excellent time with you for the last half an hour. Come and do it again soon. Always a pleasure. That was James Price, former special advisor for the Tory party. Now, when we come back, we've got a kind of exclusive about the number of unaccompanied children who are crossing the channel illegally. Then they have to go into care. What happens to them then? Stay tuned.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is...
don't you think, as a nation, we are owed a national inquiry, a public inquiry into the grooming gang scandal? That's a euphemism, by the way. This was a rape gang scandal. Gangs of rapists, predominantly Muslim men of Pakistani origin, preying on vulnerable young white girls, as many as 250,000 of them. Sustained systematic sexual abuse over many years. We've never had an inquiry, and when we were calling for an inquiry towards the end of last year, as the crescendo of protests rose, Labour turned around and said, oh, well, we're not going to, not a national one. I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll give you 5 local inquiries. And we're going, well, 5? 5? There were many more than 5 local areas. But OK, 5 million quid for 5 local inquiries. Just now, today, they've called those local inquiries off. So, in terms of the worst sexual scandal in the history of this country, the worst criminal scandal, one of the worst criminal scandals in the history of this country, what are we, the public, getting it? Nothing. Nothing. Labour just want to close the door on it because many of the local authorities involved were Labour, and they also fear that if they had an inquiry, that would offend the Muslim community or some Muslim extremists who make a lot of awkward noise for the government. And Labour want the Muslim vote. So do you think that's why they've deprived us of any kind of inquiry, national or local? They've just slipped that in quietly 45 minutes before Parliament closed for the new break. They just slipped that in. 45 minutes, playing politics with an issue like that. Your thoughts, please. 03444991000. In half an hour or so, we are going to be talking to the Conservative MP for Keighley and Ilkley. That's an area of Bradford up there in the north. To Robbie Moore, he's the MP there. He's absolutely furious about this, and I don't think he's the only one. I'm pretty angry myself. James Price then said he could hardly control his fury. This is awful. Don't play politics with this. What kind of people are you? We'll talk to Robbie later. Also, a little later, in about 20 minutes or so, is this a Stasi state? Are we turning into a Stasi state? You know all these cops that keep banging on people's doors. So I want to talk to you about a tweet you posted about 9 months ago. It's problematic, you know. We think it could be against the law under the Malicious Communications Act, so prepare to go to prison, or whatever the hell they'd say to people when they knock on their doors. You know, so we don't want people coming around, cops saying, well, 9 months ago you posted this. Shut up. Go and catch a real criminal. But that's what they're doing. We know about Alison Pearson, the Daily Telegraph columnist. It happened to her. 2 coppers turned up on her doorstep on Remembrance Sunday morning at 9:30 a.m. She answered the door in her nightie to be told she was at the centre of a police investigation into some tweet she'd posted a year before. We don't want this. Julie Bindel, the feminist writer, she had it as well. It's happening. Anyway, we learned today, guess how many times this is happening every single day? They're making 30 arrests, these coppers, these jackbooted coppers, every single day, nicking people accused of the offence of sending offensive messages. That adds up to 12,000 arrests of this sort every year. This is getting bad and serious, folks. These are the thought police. Is Britain turning into a Stasi state? We'll be dealing with that in just a little while. 03444991000, and towards the end of the hour, we'll talk about old Harry. Ginger nuts, he flew over to fight his latest appeal against the government's decision, quite rightly in my view, to deprive him of armed police protection when he deigns to visit this country. The rest of the royal family, frontline royals, they get automatic gun cops guarding them whenever they go out. Harry can't take that. He hates that. He wants that as well. But he's been told, well, you're not a frontline royal, so you're not worth the taxpayers' money. You can apply for protection when you come over, but you're not going to get it automatically. So for that reason, this guy's spending a fortune appealing. So he's in court again. He's flown 5,000 miles to be in court for his latest appeal against that decision. Meanwhile, his dad, King Charles, obviously heard he was coming. He hopped on a plane with the Queen, with Camilla, and jetted it out to Italy for the state visit. So no father and son reunion here. We'll be talking about that later in the hour, and also Meghan's new podcast is out, all about female tycoons. I simply can wait. We'll get a review of that later in the hour. So lots to come in the next 60 minutes or so. But first, we've given up journalism on this show. We were leaving it all to Liam T of Folkestone, who does it all for us. So Liam was on yesterday. We had a very, very bad line. He put in a freedom of information request to the Home Office about how many adults, migrants, were turning up with kids that weren't related to them. In my view, using them as a kind of prop to get automatic access to the country. No one's going to turn anyone away if they've got a little kid with them. By the way, Liam's also the guy who brilliantly, from a Freedom of Information request, found out that Kent, the Kent County Council, spent 20 million quid last year on free driving lessons and free driving tests for our migrant asylum seeker friends, even though they had not been given permanent residency. So why will we get, anyway, 20 million quid. Anyway, he's done it again, old Liam. He's going to join us in just a second. This time, he has established that unaccompanied kids who turn up completely on their own, poor little things, they come across the channel like illegal migrants, only they're children. So the amount of kids coming across the channel and having to be taken into care by the frontline council, which is Kent, where Liam lives. Liam lives in Folkestone, is rising fast. And it begs the question, what happens to these kids? Some of them go into care, or they all go into care, but a lot of them apparently disappear pretty damn quickly. They go missing. What happens to them? Anyway, a warm welcome to Liam T. Let's hope we got a good line today, because yesterday you could hardly hear him. Liam, talk to me. Make sure this line is good. How are you?
Hello. Does it work today?
That's better. That's better. Right, so another brilliant Freedom of Information request by you has revealed that in 2021, 1,085 youngsters arrived solo. Little kids without any parents, adults at all. Only, now it's 1,085, and then very swiftly, apparently, 112 of them just went missing, never to be seen or heard of again. Now this number, this is a disturbing syndrome. This last year, 2024 to 2025, so the last full year, you've established that 3,257 children, little kids, pitched up in small boats, and 131 of them almost immediately went missing. Now, Kent, of course, being the frontline council, has to look after their care. It's only right, they're children, so they get taken into care. I wonder what that entails, perhaps you know. But what is worrying me more is what happens to these 131 kids who went missing? What's happening there, do you think?
Well, I think it's best to actually start by defining what an unaccompanied asylum seeking child is. That is anyone up to the age of within 3 months of their 18th birthday. So you can be 17 3/4 and you're still classed as an unaccompanied child. So this is where those that are absconding are coming from.
So what we're saying, Liam, is these the ones that go missing. Now there will be some genuine young kids here, little kids, because it does happen, quite a few probably. But we all know the syndrome. You know, I'm a 12-year-old kid. Well, how come you got a beard? You know, how come you're receding and you've gone bald? You're not really 15, are you? You're 25. So it's probably the older ones who pretended to be children who go missing. But what about the ones that the genuine ones? What do you think happens to them generally?
Well, I'd like to kind of like split this into three. With the kind of the youngest, the real young ones, will go into either a foster home or a residential placement, and they will have, either a team looking after them, or they'll have somebody in Kent themselves that is a foster parent. But they'll try and identify somebody of their, culture, ethnicity, etc., and that child will go to the local school, for example. Then you've got the kids that are, like teenagers, late teenagers. They're the ones that will be in hotels and in barracks, like here in Folkestone at Napier. And then the ones that are just transitioning into adulthood, whilst their claims being assessed, if they think there's reasonable grounds for them to actually stay in the country, they'll be in like HMOs, houses of multiple occupancy. So there's a wide range of different places that these unaccompanied asylum-seeking children can go. I think what really, because my mum used to work for Kent County Council.
Good.
So that's why I kind of have like an interest in it. She's no longer with us. But there's what she always used to say is that when they abscond, Kent County Council is really overstretched when it comes to social workers, because each one of these kids has to be assigned a social worker to provide a care plan for them. So that will address their health and their educational needs, and they'll set up a weekly contact or whatever. And so when they abscond, they are only classed as missing after 28 consecutive days of no contact, zero contact. And I think it can be defined in two reasons as to why they disappear, and that can be there's push and there's pull. And I've kind of just had a thought here. It's like the pull factors is that some of these kids, they might be in a rural area and they want to go to a big city like London, Manchester, Leeds. It's a real draw for them. And also with cultures that they can identify with. Then you've also got to hook up with friends or family. What you forget is that over there in Calais, many of these young men are meeting up. They're networking. They've got friends there. They've made the trip together. And so they'll maybe want to travel up and down the country to go and actually be with them. But then one of the main pull factors here is the fact that they might have to pay back the people smuggling gangs. And the fact that we've got such a huge black market in operation in this country with drugs, etc., and also, the gig economy, Deliveroo, Turkish barbers, car washes, the list is endless. They also are pulled into those kind of nefarious activities, if you like. But then you've got the push factors, because as they start approaching the age of 18, many of them start to get the jitters, because there's when they're going through the asylum process itself. Like the golden ticket is if they're guaranteed refugee status. Then you've got the second one, which is the leave to remain for 5 years. And then they can be refused asylum, detained, and then deported. So say, for example, you were an Albanian 16-year-old, you know damn well that when you turn 18, you have no right to be here, really.
Yeah.
So there's that, and then there could be the transition to adulthood. When they become adults, the amount of support available diminishes quite dramatically when you're an adult compared to when you're a child. And also there could be an unhappiness of where they're placed, and maybe they want to. But the social worker themselves, there's a myriad of different people that have to talk to each other. It's a multi-agency, faceted approach. So they will have carried out interviews with them, try to establish where they've come from, who their networks are, and it's the risk of exploitation and going off grid. But the police will only actually get involved. It's not up to the police to actually go looking for them whilst there are children. It's down to the social services themselves.
Yeah. So what we've got here is Kent, obviously, being on the front line, takes the brunt of all this. And so your mother, God rest her soul, used to tell you how sort of swamped they were with this situation.
Yeah,
By the way, Liam, you'll be interested to hear, we're hearing, we haven't had this confirmed yet, but we're hearing that 428 came across today. So another bumper day, yeah?
It's been busy. Yeah, they started early doors about 7 o'clock this morning. And volunteer, hunter, hurricane, MFC car, but they've all gone out. So,
So you saw the water taxi service going out to meet the migrants, did you?
I didn't see them, but I could say they've got an app called Marine Traffic.
Oh,
so
okay, okay.
But I
Right.
did say I did last week. This week would be boating season, and it's watch out for Friday and Saturday. That's going to be when it really kind of is Piccadilly Circus down there.
Well, listen, you watch out for it. Go down, take your camera, and see if you can get any documentary evidence of all of this or some nice film. It'd be good to see. But as I say, 428 yesterday, and still they come. And you are unearthing all the sort of murky corners of this massive behemoth of a crisis. And here we have the story of the children, some of whom, as you quite rightly say, are probably not children, but some are. Poor Kent County Council has to deal with them. 3,257 children pitching up last year in small boats. 131 immediately went missing. Extremely worrying, but great work by you again, Liam, and we got a good line today. And let's talk again soon. Stay in touch. I know you will. Thank you very much, mate. Liam T there in Folkestone, our man on the front line. Extraordinary situation, don't you think? 03444991000. When we come back, we're going to be talking about our Stasi police and the number of arrests they're making for people sending offensive messages. You know, the thought police, what you said. Did you say this? Did you write that? It's like being in North Korea, isn't it? Anyway, 12,000 of those arrests every year, 30 every single day. Meanwhile, real crimes are going not only unsolved, they're going uninvestigated. We'll talk to former Met Detective Mike Neville next. Stay tuned.
What is happening in Birmingham is a national scandal, but it's not a national story. It's not something that's dominating the headlines. Now, obviously, there's a lot of other stuff going on, as I've just touched on, that people are focusing on. But I think what for me this underlines, before we get into the broader politics, is once again that if something doesn't happen in London, it's not really perceived to be happening at all.
Ago, I was absolutely consumed with packaging. Boxes. That's all I could think about. And I would
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Let's talk about our thought police in this country, shall we? And let's talk about crime generally. As I was just saying before the break, you know, we know what we're talking about in terms of crime generally. 1% of thefts are solved by the police. 5% of burglaries are solved by the police. When it comes to what we might categorise as traditional crime, the kind of crimes that inflict pain and suffering on people, the police don't seem to be particularly vigilant, but boy, oh boy, are they vigilant when it comes to policing what you think and what you say. They are making 30 arrests a day, every single day, over offensive posts on social media and other platforms, many of them being detained, arrested under the Malicious Communications Act. They're being detained, arrested for messages that cause annoyance, inconvenience or anxiety to others via the internet, the telephone or mail. Some of these acts are said to cause distress by the sending of grossly offensive messages or sharing content of an indecent, obscene or menacing character. You know, all of this is very, very bad, but it just does play into the fact that cops seem to be super vigilant about all this thought police. So, did you send that tweet a year ago? Did you say that? Did you put that in a WhatsApp group? You know, whereas get beaten up in the street, get your car nicked or your house burgled, they don't want to know. Let's talk to former Met Detective Mike Neville. Hello, Mike.
Good evening, Kevin.
This is, you know, this is worrying, isn't it? I mean, why is it that the police seem to throw so much effort into this malicious communications law? You know, did you send a message that somebody else found offensive? You know, 30 arrests a day for this kind of alleged offence, 12,000 a year, whereas thefts, burglaries are I mean, to say they're not solved, it's not really fair because they're not really investigated. What are the police thinking? Why are they investigating thought police crimes, thought crimes, as opposed to real crimes?
Well, I think it's quite incredible, isn't it, Kevin? Because you would think that if the police were you know, solving 90% of thefts and 90% of rapes, where they only really solve 6% of rapes, and all the burglaries instead of 5%, you think, well, they've got time on their hands and they can really focus on people being hurt by words. But the figures you've given and the figures I've given show that that isn't the case. And the public, I'm sure, would be far more pleased if the police focused on catching more burglars, robbers, thieves and rapists. And why are they focusing on this? So, see, it's very difficult for me as a sort of, I'm a dinosaur, I suppose. But then again, if I was a dinosaur, I'm a Arrestosaurus, in the sense I used to arrest real criminals. Yeah. You know, why are they focusing on this? I think it's a change in the police leadership. They're really focusing. You know, if you remember Merseyside police, about 2 or 3 years ago, this being offensive is an offence, and then they had to apologise because
it's not. Yeah,
it's not an offence. Let's get it right. It isn't an offence, and there's been this real focus on hurty words rather than hurty deeds. You know, stabbing people, burgling houses. They are hurty deeds. Why are they focusing on hurty words? I find it incredible, and it's all it does is it stops and reduces the trust and confidence in the police is at an all-time low. It's really shameful, to be honest, and it's even lower because people see this.
Well, listen, let's play a little bit of video. It's just one incident. You sent it to me, but it's in the Willesden area of kind of northwest London, and this is the kind of crime that doesn't get solved. The police go, oh, we're looking for the culprit, and you know, if you can got the information, but you can tell they don't make a whole lot of effort into it. But this is what happened when a guy apparently was chased by other guys in a car, and he ran into a restaurant in Willesden to take shelter. Now, I should tell everyone before we play this, it's quite violent, so you may find it upsetting, but we've cut out, trust me, we've cut out the worst of it. But this is how this incident began, and I'm only playing it because I think it's kind of an example of a terrible crime that you sense the police are sort of shoulder shrugging about it, not really doing a whole lot about it. Let's just have a look at that. This happened last week in a restaurant in northwest London. So there they go. That's the staff there, and this guy comes. So this is the guy. Look, here's the guy in a mask. So this guy with the turquoise, there's a guy with turquoise sleeves on. He now goes to the ground, and you could see his knife there. And as I say, sorry if you found that disturbing, but the rest of the video is seriously disturbing. Can't really play it on a family radio show or a family television show, but he literally just time and time again goes in to stab this guy. Luckily the guy...
Not only that, Kevin, he actually films himself. He stops and films himself.
That's right.
Films himself stabbing the guy. Incredible.
Yeah. He films himself.
And I think it's...
Yeah. And then he leaves, and the cops... You know, as I say, they've gone through the motions. Oh, we're looking for a man in his 20s. Have you got any information and all that? But you just get this is the sort of thing that's happening day in, day out on the streets of particularly the cities, particularly London, but all over the country. Acts of extreme violence, you know, casual mass shoplifting, civil unrest. It's happening all the time. And meanwhile, the police seem to concentrate on arresting middle-class people for hurty words on social media. Well, how have we come to this point where I would suggest the police's values are warped? They're all wrong. How have we got to this point?
I think we got to the point where, you know, it came from, if you look back at the Blair years, the people who are in charge now were the superintendents really in charge at that time of Blair, when he was obsessed with diversity and all sorts of other things that were not about real crime, you know. So they're obsessed with racism, they're obsessed with homophobia, they're obsessed with, and what people want, whether people are black or white, gay or straight or whatever they are, what the people want is that they can feel safe in their homes and safe when they walk the streets. But this has been warped into this point where somebody's putting a political opinion on Twitter or on Facebook, and the police are checking that rather than catching the guys who are doing evil crimes like the stabbing you saw there. And it really needs a change of leadership, a change of direction. Somebody to come in and say, look, what we're going to focus on is catching burglars, catching rapists, catching robbers. We're not going to focus on these hurty words until we've solved all those other real crimes. But what you see, though, you know, the strap line I can see is two-tier justice. You saw a mother with no previous convictions sent to prison for 31 months for putting an offensive tweet on after the Southport riots. Now, really, the offence, it was very offensive, but she could have been brought in and given a caution. That would have been enough. But what people see, they see two-tier policing, and beyond that, they see two-tier justice, which is supported by the Prime Minister. So the highest levels, this is supported. And so the chief constables, if they want to get promoted and they want to be the commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, they see that we have a liberal left-wing government, and they're going to follow this track because that's what they want.
Yeah, no, exactly right. There's something going badly wrong in the policing of this country. I wish you were back in the force, Mike. But Mike, thank you very much for joining us as always. The great Mike Neville, the former Met detective. He's right, isn't he? Something's going wrong here. I mean, we played that film. It's just one example. Stuff like that's happening all over the country. And cops are wasting their time. 30 arrests for people posting hurty words. Were you offensive to this person? Well, so what if I was? You know, as Mike just said, it actually is not an offence to be offensive. Why are they doing this? And when they, you know, if they arrest, maybe it doesn't come to any charges, but they'll write you down in their non-crime hate incident book. You know, what is going on? Why are they doing this? If it's not a crime, why are the police involved? They're monitoring us, they're checking us, you know, they're trying to socially engineer our behaviour. Don't say anything racist, don't say that. If you do that, you'll be in trouble. You know, nobody is encouraging people to be nasty to each other on social media or in WhatsApp groups, and sometimes people post messages that are really horrible, really horrible, but they don't really present a threat to the community. That guy with the knife, he presents a threat to the community. I bet you they never catch him. So what do you think, folks? Two-tier policing, what's going wrong? Why are the police concentrating on people causing offence on Twitter or Facebook and not catching knife criminals, people who stab people, burglars, thieves, car thieves? Why aren't they doing anything about that? 03444991000. When we come back after this break, we're going to be talking to Robbie Moore, MP for Keighley and Ilkley. That's an area of Bradford up in the north, about the shocking state of affairs after Labour today abandoned the last vestiges of plans for any inquiries into the rape gang scandal, the grooming gang scandal, if you like, at all. They've just abandoned, there's no inquiries at all. There were going to be 5 locals, they've scrapped them. So we'll talk to Robbie next. You let me know what you think about this. I think this is a disgrace, it really is. 03444991000. Stay tuned.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Let's talk about, we euphemistically called this the grooming gang scandal. What we're really talking about is rape gangs. This went on for many years, and we know the story, don't we? That the authorities, the police, teachers, social workers, local councillors systematically turned a blind eye to the fact that there were these gangs of predominantly Muslim men of Pakistani origin sort of roaming the country or roaming their areas, preying on vulnerable young white girls, grooming them with drugs and drink, sexually abusing them, raping them. That went on for years. We're talking about potentially 250,000 young girls. You know, we all know the story. Now, it was last year when the latest of this this lot got sentenced to, quite rightly, to prison sentences. And we all said, the nation said, look, we want a national inquiry into this scandal. We're all a bit national inquiry kind of weary. We have too many. But this warranted a public inquiry. Labour, many of us think because they're a bit worried about offending the Muslim community, because they want the Muslim vote, said, oh, no, we're not going to do a public inquiry. But I'll tell you what we'll do for you. We'll have 5 local inquiries in the local areas where this happened. A lot of us said, well, hang on a second, there's a lot more than 5 local areas. But anyway, if that's what it is, that's what it is. So 5 local inquiries. Today, quietly, with 45 minutes to go before Parliament closed for the break, Labour called off those local inquiries. So now, folks, we're getting no inquiries at all into the worst sexual scandal, one of the worst sexual scandals, criminal scandals this country has ever had the misfortune to witness. This is a disgrace, I would say. Let's find out what the Conservative MP Keighley and Ilkley, which is up near Bradford, Robbie Moore, thinks. Hello, Robbie. Welcome to the show. Your thoughts?
Well, look, I'm infuriated by today's announcement by the Home Office. This goes against absolutely everything that they promised back in January earlier this year, where there was an announcement at the dispatch box that there would be 5 local inquiries with £5 million allocated to those inquiries. And then at the last minute, just before Easter recess today, the Home Office has effectively reneged on that. There was no mention at all from the dispatch box today about any local inquiries taking place. Indeed, they've watered down the provisions of the £5 million that has been allocated to not specifically be referencing local inquiries, but wider issues to do with child sexual exploitation. So incredibly frustrated by today, and it does not achieve my absolute mission of getting a statutory inquiry across the Bradford districts that I've been calling on for years.
Exactly right. And, what I think a lot of people will be enraged about here is Labour, I think, are playing politics with this. They're trying to sweep it under the carpet because it'll be an uncomfortable issue for them, because many of the local authorities where these abominations happen, where these terrible crimes occurred, were Labour administrations. And also, let's not beat about the bush, Labour does not like to offend the Muslim community because it relies on the Muslim vote. So a lot of us who are cynical about the wonderful world of politics believe that this is at the root of this, that Labour don't want to make a thing of this because they don't want to offend, shall we say, some of the noisier, more extreme elements of our Muslim community, which in itself is a disgrace. But Robbie, you know, as I say, I think a lot of people are kind of weary about public inquiries. I think we call too many of them. But this was an issue. This is one of the worst scandals ever to hit this country. The nation, the people of this country, we deserved a national public inquiry, did we not? But at the very least, for God's sake, don't abandon these 5 local inquiries you offered us. So we're getting nothing now. That's a scandal, isn't it?
Well, it is, and it's just infuriating. Look, we have been calling for a national inquiry specifically on the issue of rape gangs now. We envisage there being about 50 towns that are where concerns around child sexual exploitation, rape gang issues have taken place. I've been advocating for one to take place across Keighley, my constituency, within the Bradford district and across the Bradford district now consistently. And again, we are no further forward. It just infuriates me that the British state is consistently failing, whether it is national government or local government, those victims, those survivors. And when you represent an area like the Bradford district, where I fear that the scale of this issue of rape gangs, child sexual exploitation will dwarf that of Rotherham, of Telford, of Rochdale, and yet we have our local authority, where they had the opportunity of voting on this very issue just a couple of months ago. It was voted down by the Labour administration. And then we have our national government not willing to step in and go against the local consensus. So we are stuck between a rock and a hard plate, where a local authority is saying we don't want it, and we have got the government not even willing to use the statutory powers that they have to force that local inquiry. And I'm getting sick and tired about this issue. I've been talking about this issue since being lucky enough to be representing Keighley since 2019. I think I've raised the issue about 40 odd times in the House of Commons chamber now, and yet we do not seem to be any further forward. The government need to do the right thing, step up now and back our calls for that national inquiry that focuses on areas like the Bradford district.
Now, Jess Phillips, she kind of made this announcement that the £5 million have been set aside for these 5 local inquiries, and they gave us some old guff about feeding that $5 million into fund locally led work on grooming gangs. What does that even mean? Now, Jess Phillips, as I say, made this announcement. She is the Minister for Safeguarding and Violence Against Women and Girls. That job title, considering what Labour have just announced, it's almost a sick joke, isn't it? In what way does she feel that abandoning any sort of inquiry into what went on is safeguarding women and girls against sexual violence? In what way does she think that she justifies her job title here?
Well, again, this is just more frustration by this Labour government that we have. You know, they were forced to the dispatch box back in January on the back of a huge amount of public pressure to make some sort of announcement. They made an announcement back in January that £5 million would be allocated to having 5 locally led inquiries, but yet 3 months down the line, on the back of them initially promising that there would be an independent KC, Tom Crowther, that led the Telford inquiry, working the framework up that would then focus on these 5 little inquiries. And then today, literally, the last statement that came out from the government before the Easter recess, they've rolled back on how that £5 million will be allocated. They did not mention 5 locally led inquiries at all. And then on the Home Affairs Select Committee, which met just last week, we had Tom Crowther in front of us, and he said that he's had no or very, very little interaction with the Home Secretary on this issue, and therefore has not been involved in working up the framework. And indeed, Labour ministers and Labour advisors are going to be working up that framework themselves. This, to me, just stinks of more smoke and mirrors coming out from this government, and again, actually just goes against everything that they said that they would do back in January. And the worst thing about all of this is it has not got the victims and the survivors at the heart of what this government is doing. They want justice, and they want reassurance and trust to be reinstalled back in the system between them and the state. And when the state continues to fail them, that trust is further eroded. And that's what infuriates me even more, particularly when I am having those victims come to me at surgery meetings in Keighley wanting this inquiry to take place. I only hope the government do the right thing when we get back after Easter and reverse this decision that they reluctantly are not coming to.
Yeah, well, I know that my audience will share your fury. I do too. They're playing politics here. They're sweeping this under the carpet. And frankly, the way they've done it, with 45 minutes notice before the government went in, or the Parliament went into recess, is just a disgrace. It's a disgrace. Robbie, we'll keep in touch on this one. Thank you very much for your time. Robbie Moore there, the MP, Conservative MP for Keighley and Ilkley area of Bradford. His constituents, some of his constituents are the victims of these rape gangs. No wonder he is so energised. Let me know what you think. Labour has swept the inquiries into the rape gang scandal under the carpet. They already deprived the nation of a national public inquiry. So we'll give you 5 locals. How's that suit you? We reluctantly went, all right then, but you could have done better. They've now cancelled even the local inquiries. Your thoughts, please. 0344 499 1000. When we come back, we'll talk to royal biographer Angela Levin about Harry's day in court today. He's flown over from the States. And also, Meghan's got her new podcast out. I don't think people are all that excited about it, but we'll talk about both of those issues after this break.
What is happening in Birmingham is a national scandal, but it's not a national story. It's not something that's dominating the headlines. Now, obviously, there's a lot of other stuff going on, as I've just touched on, that people are focusing on. But I think what for me this underlines, before we get into the broader politics, is once again that if something doesn't happen in London, it's not really perceived to be happening at all.
You've had Trump yesterday that's basically said that in retaliation to China's retaliation, he's going to put this extra 50% tariff on Chinese goods that are already tariffs, which means that the taxes that the US consumer, US businesses will have to pay on imports from China in some cases is going to be over 100%.
Yep.
So basically we're in this huge escalation of the trade war, certainly between China and America, but in a sort of more promising sign, it looks like
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Harry flew into Britain quite quietly, we think yesterday, just as his dad probably heard he was coming, hopped on a plane to Italy with Camilla for the official state visit. Harry today went to court for his latest appeal against the decision by the authorities, by the government, to deprive him of automatic armed police guard when him and his family visit this country. So he doesn't get cops with guns automatically. The rest of the royal family do, because they're frontline workers. He says that he doesn't deserve this inferior treatment. A lot of people say, well, you do actually, mate, because unlike the rest of the royal family, you don't work for us. You don't do any frontline duties, therefore, and you live in America, so why should we pay for your armed police guard? But anyway, there he was in court again. Let's speak to a woman who knows him well, wrote a book about him and spent some time with him, royal biographer Angela Levin. Pleasure to have you on the show as usual, Angela. Your thoughts about today? I mean, he's like a dog with a bone, isn't he? He will not give this case up. And
yes.
When you analyse it, it's preposterous, his case. It's just, I want the same as the rest of the family. Why can't I have the same as the rest of the family? Well, Harry, it's because unlike the rest of the family, you don't work for this country. You don't perform frontline duties. You do not warrant armed police guards when you come here, right?
Right, but let me just tell you that there's only 4 of them that get this type of attention. It's the King, the Queen, and it's William and Catherine. The Edinburghs don't.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, Princess Anne doesn't get it. It's only the top 4, and they don't complain once, the rest of them. He gets a lot of attention if he comes over here, and it's agreed that he's here for a special offer. I didn't think that he should have got it for today, but if he sees his the other members of the royal family, he does get proper, looking after. But he doesn't deserve it at all, because he wants it to come out of our tax. Now, can you believe that? Why anyone would like to do that, to keep him here? And he says, Meghan's wouldn't be happy if she was not sure of the protection. And she can't stand this country. She can't stand us. She doesn't want to come. So why should you do it? He also says that the children can't feel safe. Well, they're little tiny tots. A 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, you don't have to tell them that there's a chance that someone's going to come and try and kill daddy. You don't have to say anything. They wouldn't even notice. They don't know anything about this country. And I think that's all a nonsense too. He just feels very hard done by again. He's a victim and it's not fair. And people have deliberately left him out of being, looked after carefully. It's absolute nonsense. And I hope that the judge does single out that and say this is absolute nonsense. We've told him 3 times now that this is not going to happen. And he keeps coming back and spending vast amount of money to try and get some money out. I think he just wants to show Meghan he can do something, and that's not going to work.
And he's especially jealous of his brother. That's what this is all about. He's furious that William and Kate get automatic gun guards when they go out.
They're heirs to the throne.
I know. I mean, I'm just putting his point of view. And he was told at his last appeal, the judge said, effectively said, listen, mate, this is a lost cause. You're never going to win this case. Yes. And yet he's come back for more. And the Home Office, the defence barrister, if you like, has said that this is down to a continued case of failure to see the wood for the trees. And that's about right, isn't it?
Yeah, that is about right. And the other thing is that he has shouted at his father at every opportunity that he should tell the government what to do and he should make sure that he is well looked after. But, you can't do that if it's a constitutional monarchy, and you can't decide what the government is going to do. It's just not on. He must know that. And that's really one of the reasons why the king doesn't speak to him, because every time he wants to go there, he comes out with his shouting match, and he has to be very careful not to be included in anything, because Harry doesn't always stick to what you actually say. He sticks to what he thinks you should say, and he could give you in a lot of trouble.
Absolutely.
So that's one of the reasons why he's not singing, and quite right too.
Yeah, I think that Italian state visit came at a great time for Charles. Couldn't wait to get out of the country. And Camilla, she seriously wouldn't want to bump into old Ginger Nuts. Now, meanwhile, it's that time, Angela. We've got to talk about Meghan Markle because she's released the first issue of her podcast, Confessions of a Female Founder. In this one, she interviews Whitney Wolfe Herd, who founded the female-focused dating app Bumble, and she also founded Tinder, and she literally has made billions. So she's a Montecito neighbour, a woman of talent. But before we discuss this landmark podcast, let's have a little look at an excerpt.
A month ago, I was absolutely consumed with packaging. Boxes. That's all I could think about. And I would sit there doing the unboxing in my head. Is there tissue paper? What about the packing peanuts? But they're biodegradable. And where does the sticker go? And hold on, and what size the box is going to be? And no, that's not going to fit all the SKUs. Oh my gosh. And then someone says, but you don't want to brand the outside of the box because of porch pirates. Had never heard that before. What's a porch pirate?
Does she think that's interesting?
No,
have you heard it yet, Angela?
Yes, I have. It's not interesting. What I expect is exactly right, is that she doesn't listen to anybody else. She wants to actually talk herself. And I think on the first one, which is we heard today, they had to add questions so that the person could give answers, because Meghan only wanted to tell them about her life and what had happened to her. I mean, she's not an interviewer. I've never seen anybody who's less an interviewer. And to actually also to get on about her medical scare. What's it called? Postpartum preeclampsia.
Preeclampsia, yeah. I mean, she sort of, I think, tried to sell the podcast on the back of her sort of post-birth health drama. So she did suffer from this high blood pressure condition, and I gather that Whitney Wolfe Herd did too. Well, she says she did, but it is a bit.
Did she have it after her Archie? Because if so, the hospital would never let her go half an hour after she gave birth. Absolutely never. So what had happened, I really don't know. The Duchess of Edinburgh had it very badly, and she nearly died. But did she make a fuss? Does she want to tell everybody about it? Not at all. I mean, she's just
This was headline hunting. This wasn't it? This was a way to get this dreary podcast into the papers.
She's obsessed that we listen to her non-stop. I mean, it's just too much. It's every day there's something she's doing, or she's making sure she's in the headline, because she's so nervous about actually being wanted and admired. So she's doing a whole load of things and actually falling down on all of them, because she does them too quickly without actually looking at the detail, and she won't be told. She won't be told what to do.
Absolutely.
The people who've got that experience, she just makes a mess of everything.
Yeah, she does, and I can't wait to listen to this podcast. But Angela, I've got to go, but thank you so much for your time. It's always a pleasure. So we will be back in a little while to discuss what it is that Team Trump, Donald, hates about Keir Starmer. That next, stay tuned.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is
Welcome back. In a little while, I'll be taking your calls. 03444 991 1000. You might want to get involved in the fact that Labour has called off any kind of inquiry into the rape gang scandal. They've just done this. They should have given us a public inquiry, a national public inquiry, but they gave us the sap of 5 local inquiries in the areas where they were supposed to be worst hit by the rape gang scandal. Happened all over the country, by the way. 250,000 victims, they think. So 5 local inquiries was hardly enough anyway. But now they've cancelled them as well. So no inquiry whatsoever into the worst sexual scandal in the history of this country. What do you think about that? 03444 499 1000. Why are Britain's thought police, the Stasi cops, nicking 30 people every single day for offensive messages, hurty words in WhatsApp groups, on social media? 12,000 arrests for this kind of thing every single year. Things that you say. It's not offensive, by the way, to be offensive. It's not an offence to be offensive, but the police seem to think it is. Why is this happening? Also, the latest nonsense in the migrant crisis. Tell me what you think about that. You know, the French have taken a very tiny slice of that £500 million we gave them to patrol their own borders and invested in a sort of risible roadblock, a little gate, a single bar gate that goes like this. They don't close it during the night, during the day. So from dawn till dusk, you just drive straight through it. At night, they bring it down, but you can just drive straight round it. 428 migrants, we think, came across the channel today as well. So still they come, still they come. What are we ever going to do about this crisis? Because the French aren't helping us one bit, are they? 03444 499 1000. Let me know what you think about Lucy Connolly now that Elon Musk has joined the growing throng of prominent people who are calling for that woman to be released from prison. She should not be doing 2 years and 7 months for a silly post on X, on Twitter, calling for mass deportations and the burning of Asylum Seekers Hotel. Horrible thing to write. That's why she deleted it about a few hours later. She didn't leave it up for that long. 2 years, 7 months. She's the wife of a Tory councillor, a mum. You know, what's she doing in jail? Why are people in jail for things they write on social media? We've got to stop this, haven't we? 03444 499 1000. So those are the big issues. Get in touch. Let me know what you think. And you can talk about anything you like, if you like. But maybe you want to talk about older Harry, who won't give up. He still wants armed guards, copped with guns to guard him when he comes to Britain. Well, that'll cost us a load of money. Why should we pay any money to keep that guy safe? What's he got to do with us? He lives in California. He's a multi-millionaire. Pay for your own protection when you come over. Don't charge your father's subjects, as in us, every time you come over. Hey, how about that? Let me know what you think about that. 03444 999 1000. Now, let's talk about Keir Starmer. Now, the special relationship between Britain and America, it's a thing. Sometimes you see it in a very forthright way. Maggie Thatcher and Ronald Reagan, remember that. Even Blair and George W. Bush, although they're from different sides of the political fence, they got on very well. The special relationship was going great guns during those days. It's still around. How much Trump and his team particularly love Britain, I would say, is dubious. But Donald, his mum's Scottish, or his mum was Scottish. He's got golf courses here. He's very keen on Britain. So there is something there. But I say that we didn't get any special deal out of the tariff situation. We got what everybody else got. We got a 10% tariff on American goods. Fair enough, that's half what the European Union got, but 25% on cars. So he hit us pretty damned hard. So Keir Starmer going around saying, oh, well, I have a very special relationship with the president. We didn't get anything out of it at all, did we? And I would suggest that's because Americans, a lot of the stuff we've been talking about tonight, are shocked and appalled to see this authoritarian British government locking people up for protesting about the migrant crisis, sending housewives to jail for posting hurty words on social media, and they're particularly upset about the fate of a Christian activist called Livia Tossici-Bolt, who's just been ordered to pay £20,000 for 2 charges of breaching the Public Spaces Protection Order on 2 days back in March 23, when she stood within the prescribed 150-metre buffer zone. You're not allowed, if you want to protest about abortion, you have to stay 150 metres away. She went within that distance and stood by a Bournemouth abortion clinic holding a placard emblazoned with "Here to talk if you want." So she's got a criminal record now for that. And the Americans, many of whom, they're against abortion. It's more of a thing over there. Most Europeans are very much in favour of abortion. Unusually for me, I'm in favour of the more liberal line on this one. I'm in favour of a woman's right to choose, but I'm also in favour of people like Livia Tossici-Bolt's right to protest. And I don't think she should be criminalised for standing outside a abortion clinic saying, "Here to talk if you want." Americans are shocked by this. So I think that the problem between America, between Donald Trump's White House, Team Trump if you like, and Keir Starmer's socialist government here is cultural. I think the Americans see what they perceive to be our war on free speech, our war on freedom, and they're shocked and they don't like it. Therein lies the problem. Let's talk to a man who's soon to return to God's own country, forced out by our new tyrannical tax measures brought in by Keir Starmer. He is the chairman of the Republican Overseas Organisation, Greg Swenson. Welcome, Greg.
Good to see you, Kevin.
Always a pleasure. Well, listen, we'll get to your particular circumstances in a second, because I think it's well worth talking about that Keir Starmer, among his many other mistakes, I think has made an enemy of a lot of wealthy foreigners, including people like yourself. The tax restrictions now on wealthy Americans, wealthy French, wealthy people from around the world here are prohibitive. And they're leaving at the rate of 1 millionaire every 45 minutes. Pretty soon, you're going to be going back to your home country, driven out after, well, how long have you been there, 10 years or so?
10 years,
10 years, driven out by these new tax measures, which is a disgrace. And also, I'm going to miss you, mate. But let's first of all talk about what I see as the cultural divide between Team Trump, the White House now, and the British government, Keir Starmer. Let's face it, Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, they're going to pay Keir lip service. Oh, yeah, you're the British Prime Minister. Don't we get on well? Have a second helping of chicken. But they don't like him, and they don't like what his socialist government stands for. They don't like his enmity of freedom of speech. They don't like people protesting about abortion getting a criminal record. They don't like Keir Starmer sending people to prison for writing hurty words on social media. This is at the root of the problems we've got with America. The Americans don't see that we are on the same cultural level as them, the same cultural wagon, and they don't like it.
Kevin, you bring up a great point, and I think, the Americans are quite, close to the UK, and I think President Trump actually likes the UK. Ignoring Keir Starmer and this assault on free speech for a minute. So there is a fondness that the president has for the UK. Even J.D. Vance in his comments in Munich at the security conference, referred to the UK as our friends. And that's all great. And I think Keir, he has to do what he's doing. I'm not sure he has an alternative, but he might be overconfident in that relationship. There are always speed bumps in the special relationship. I think they can get through it, but you're absolutely right. Why is America defending? We should be defending the West, but the UK and many other countries in Europe are no longer being the West. They've abandoned the traditional cultural aspects, starting with free speech, imprisoning. You went through the litany of examples, and but there's two other points. One is, remember Trump derangement syndrome. It still exists, but it especially existed in the first term. So, there's probably not a lot of love lost with the way that the president was treated. And, why, it's okay for us to criticize Keir Starmer. It's okay for Trump and J.D. Vance, especially, to criticize him. And that normally would have been considered, sort of uncool, right? You wouldn't do that in the old days. You wouldn't get involved in someone else's politics. You wouldn't comment on another, especially an ally's political situation. But they tore up that contract in Trump's first term, and especially during the campaign when a lot of these people of the left were hypercritical of President Trump and calling him names. He's a fascist, he's a Nazi, and all that ridiculous garbage and nonsense. So I think that's something to consider as well. And then the last thing, which is maybe a little more self-interested, is, look, we're happy to defend our allies, but if they're going to do really ridiculous things, don't make us pay for it. And in many respects, we America are defending Western Europe. This is not picking on the UK. This is more on Western Europe. You can run your countries the way you want. You can embrace climate insanity and net zero. You can allow mass migration to, without regard to your population, your voters. We don't agree with that. I wish you wouldn't do it, but just don't make me pay for it.
Yeah, I mean, there's already reason. Old Donald Trump, he does change the dial, and he's changing the dial even in this nation. So Keir Starmer, of course, was all over this. This was a proposed British ban on content online that was, and this is to quote the proposed law, legal but harmful content. Right? In other words, we'll decide what's harmful and we'll restrict the ability of the social media companies, to operate without our laws coming down on them. So this is, again, basically, I know that you get harmful content online, but if you start cracking down on it, that, I'm afraid, is cracking down on freedom of expression and freedom of speech. So two-tier Keir was right into this. He loved this idea, banning legal but harmful content, which would have opened a can of worms, because people would say, well, what constitutes harmful? But Keir likes things like that. But anyway, he's dropped that. He's axed that, because he's worried that Donald Trump will not like this level of sort of nanny state overreach, and it might affect the alleged negotiations for us to get a special trade deal. So fear of Donald's contempt for Keir Starmer's natural railing against freedom of speech has made Starmer drop this oppressive measure. So it does work, but that sums up the problem, doesn't it? There's such a difference between people like Keir Starmer and people like Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. Freedom of speech in America is very sacred. Yep. And they look across the Atlantic, Americans, and they go, hang on, wait, they're locking people up in jail for stuff they write on Facebook in Britain. Yeah, we are. Yeah, we are.
Yeah, what happened to this great country that most of our founding documents are, were written by Englishmen and based on the great documents of this great country here in Great Britain. So it's really sad to see, and it's a shame that the Prime Minister had to make that decision based on fear of the relationship, deteriorating with President Trump. But it's a shame. You know, he should have made that decision because
naturally, but he was banging favour. He was leading the charge. He loved this. Keir Starmer naturally, and so do a lot of his socialist chums in this crappy cabinet of ours. They naturally rail against freedom of speech. Bridget Phillipson, the education secretary, her first measure when she came into power was to cancel the Tory Act, which was to allow freedom of speech on university campuses. In other words, unless you're breaking the law, freedom of speech must prevail. She came in and cancelled that, said, oh no, we don't want freedom of speech on our campuses. It's unbelievable.
No, they're only universities, for God's sake. And so, you know, look, I think, you know, it's Orwellian, and it's become like the Big Brother state where Big Brother decides what's fair, you know, what's permissible and what's misinformation or disinformation. It also points to a really unfortunate problem here in Western Europe and especially in the UK. The people, according to polling, but according to conversations on the street as well, you know, they care about affordability and the cost of living, and they care about mass migration and illegal migration in the UK, in other countries in Europe. The same case in the US prior to the election. And yet all the government wants to talk about is policing so-called misinformation, which again is just Big Brother Orwellian madness, and the great existential crisis of climate change. So, you know, the people are worried about cost of living and illegal migration or mass migration, and all the government can talk about is net zero and policing misinformation and putting housewives in jail.
Yeah, and we heard today that the police are arresting 12,000 people a year. That's 30 people every day for messages, for offensive messages sent online, WhatsApp, the social media sites. You know, it's getting quite worrying. It's feeling more and more like North Korea here. Yeah. But let's talk about the wealth exodus, which is another worrying aspect of the way this country is being governed. So ideologically, this Labour government came in and they cancelled all non-dom tax privileges. In other words, rich people who got tax breaks because we kind of wanted them here because they create wealth, they tend to employ people, they pay big taxes. Well, that was all cancelled. And so people like you're having to go back to America because they've taxed you to the hilt. You can't afford it anymore. And a snapshot of this crisis, I hope you don't mind me saying, but you with your little dog, I always forget, is it Ginger? Yeah, it's Ginger, right? Yeah, with your little dog Ginger. So figure this, folks. Greg will be on this plane, is it next week? Flying back to America. It's called Bark Air. It's a special kind of flashy airline for, shall we say, people with a couple of bucks to fly their dogs in some style. So Greg will be on this sort of pretty much private jet with about 10 other Americans with their dogs flying back to America because of this tax craziness, because this socialist government, frankly, is victimizing people like you. And we now know that a millionaire leaves this country every 45 minutes. So millionaires and their dogs next week will be on that flight. I mean, talk about that. It must be, you know, it must be really 10 years and you've got to go back. It must be distressing for you.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's not a good moment. You know, we both like it here. My wife and I, Mary Ellen and I, really love it here. It's been great, but you know, we have to do what's rational. And when you tax people too much, they tend to leave. And we see this in America with the red state, blue state phenomenon, where people are leaving. You know, $40 billion of taxable income left California last year, your former state. You know, $9 billion left Tim Walz's Minnesota. I mean, this is a radical experiment in socialism, both in the United States and here. And by raising the tax rate, and basically what they're doing is taxing people, not just expats, but Brits too, on worldwide income, where prior to April 5th, you were only taxed on income that you earned in the United Kingdom or money that you patriated here. So when people wave in, buy pounds and move the assets to the UK to pay the bills, you pay income tax on that. Unfortunately, instead of getting some of their money, now they will get none of their money. So this is a mass exodus of capital from the United Kingdom. This is really urgent. And, look, the UK is ranked number 2 in the world on the exodus of capital, only outflanked by China, where people are so desperate to get out of that place. And so they're moving. And guess where they're moving to? 3 countries that lead the influx of millionaires. UAE, no surprise there. Singapore, no income tax, no surprise there. The third is the United States. And so, people want to move where, they're welcome. The capital is welcome. There's entrepreneurship. There's an effort to, it's very suitable for starting a new company, opening a business. It's not just low taxes, because the U.S. has taxes. It's not quite as radical as the UK or the rest of Europe, but it's really it's sad to see. And I think the Treasury, and here's the most important part, the Treasury here will lose money. Yeah. They are going to get more taxation because they raised the rates or they expanded the breadth of where they tax you on.
It's purely ideological. That's what's annoying. I mean, we're going to take a big we are taking a huge financial hit with all these wealth creators leaving this country. They'll no longer pay any tax. So it's a lose-lose situation for this country, all on the back of socialist idealism, and that is terrifying. What day are you actually leaving these fair shores, Greg?
This coming Friday, but I'll be back on June 1. I'm going to exploit my 90 days.
Yeah, you've got 90 days, haven't you? You can
which is permitted by Big Brother. And if I stayed over 90 days, I'd have to pay the HMRC a handsome amount of money. But it's a radical move by the government. And before we pick on labor too much, remember Jeremy Hunt started this last spring. I think he wanted to get ahead of labor in hopes that, by taxing the rich, he could get some votes. Didn't really work out. But, so I don't want to pick on labor too much, although
I do.
Coming.
I do, if you don't mind.
Yeah. But, again, Jeremy Hunt, what a shameless, for the party of the right to make that kind of a decision, that they thought it was a good idea to tax people on worldwide income. And by the way, the inheritance tax is really meaningful. I think that's why most of the people are leaving. It's not the income tax, it's the inheritance tax. They're not going to stay here in this country and give half of their money to the king. The last time the Brits tried this, we shot them. Yeah. And that was 250 years ago when a bunch of farmers, grabbed 15 muskets down at Mike's barn and took on the greatest army that had ever been assembled. Because they raised our taxes. So, there's a little history there. Don't worry, I'm not going to take
don't shoot us, Greg.
I'm not going to take on the redcoats here. That's not it.
If it's any consolation, the last Tory government seriously hiked my taxes as well to an enormous extent. So you're exactly right. I pay huge taxes. I'm sure you do too. But Labour hasn't made it any worse because the Tories were just as bad. Listen, Greg, got to go now, but we'll get a beer in before you leave. It's been a pleasure and all the best. Good talking to you. Greg Swenson there, who, as I say, will be leaving this fair country next week. I'm tempted to say end of an era, but it's the end of an era. It really is. Thanks, Greg. All the best. Next up, your calls, your messages, your WhatsApp voice notes, all of that. Let's get cracking after this break.
Joe Biden also introduced very protectionist measures to create jobs in America, create green jobs in America. He said, well, government will give you a grant to buy an electric car as long as it's made in the US.
Right.
The same with other green bling and stuff. Well, nobody seemed to accuse him of sort of closing down world trade, but he was just as protectionist really as Donald Trump.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. I'm going to go to the phones in just a little while. Samantha sent me a message and we're talking about this announcement today by Labour that they're basically calling off any kind of inquiry whatsoever into the worst sexual scandal this country has ever had the misfortune to witness, the grooming gang scandal. Well, let's call it what it was. It wasn't grooming, it was rape gangs, wasn't it? Samantha says, I watched some of Parliament today. I can't get it out of my head. What I heard Jess Phillips saying is disgusting. I mean, Jess Phillips always struck me as one of the better ones. I mean, is she really happy with this? Is she really happy that we're calling off any kind of inquiry into the rape gang scandal? They're playing politics with this, and I just think it's entirely wrong. Susan says, if someone touches someone in Parliament, there is a big scandal. These are grown-ups. The rapists, this is talking about the rapists took little girls and used them over and over again. Why don't they get the same justice? It's two-tier as well. That's from Susan. I'll read some more messages in just a second. I don't know if we've got any WhatsApp voice notes, but if we have, we'll play those out. But first, let's talk to Trevor in Edinburgh. Hello, Trevor.
Hello, Kevin. I've been listening very carefully to your show, and I particularly liked what Greg Svensson was saying, the chair of the Republicans overseas, because it does seem that now that in the UK, freedom of speech is more or less over for everybody. And here's my question. I wrote a paper on this when I was at college 3 or 4 years ago before I got sick. I was quite ill in hospital. But anyway, long story short, I wrote a paper on free speech and why free speech is valuable and why it's absolutely necessary that people are allowed to agree to disagree. You should be allowed, as a person, you're a public commentator, you're on radio, you should be allowed, so long as you don't slander somebody or libel somebody by saying something untrue about that person or that individual, you should be allowed, Kevin, to disagree entirely with the Labour Party government and say that they're really, in your opinion, you should be openly allowed to say they're crap at their job, they've destroyed the lives of thousands, millions
I do
of
say
people.
that every day.
Yes, and I'll tell you something, if you were ever pulled up for that by anybody in authority because somebody in government didn't like what you're saying, they don't agree with Kevin O'Sullivan, they think Kevin O'Sullivan is being overly critical, I would argue to the death for your right to say what you say and think what you think, because otherwise freedom of speech is supposed to be a right in this country, isn't it? You know, we talk about human rights, our right to freedom of assembly, freedom to believe, freedom to speak, freedom to disagree. Now, if you start to try and curtail that in any way, either by jailing people, fining people, suppressing what newspapers do, or suppressing what the media does in terms of reporting. Just for example, a certain huge network that you and I both know about, which is British, is not allowed to report from Israel right now. Right now, they're not allowed in Israel. And I'm not talking about the politicians, I'm talking about the network that delivers world news.
Yeah.
Now, that's a curtailment on their right to go in there.
Yeah, but that's up to Israel. If you're talking about the BBC, Israel, I think with a lot of justification, thinks that the BBC does not report on the Middle East fairly towards them. So, it's up to you what you do with your country. And Israel doesn't let the BBC in. It doesn't let a lot of other journalists in either, to be fair. But Trevor, the thing is, the problem we've got with freedom of speech, to be fair, Labour suck up a lot of criticism from people like me, and they do it with a certain magnanimity. They do that okay. The problem we have with freedom of speech is when we start sending people to prison for what they write on Facebook or on Twitter. Now that is an affront to freedom of speech. You might also argue that this woman who's just been found guilty of breaching the buffer zone around an abortion clinic, she didn't really protest, she just said, if you want to talk, I'm here. You might argue that sort of suppressing her right to protest is an affront to freedom of speech. So this is where it really matters. It's where individuals, the fact that coppers are arresting 30 people every single day for allegedly sending offensive messages online or on WhatsApp or on social media. These are the serious affronts to freedom of speech. What happens to individuals when the police or the authorities decide they've said something that's offensive or racist? You could argue, of course we don't condone racism in any way, but it didn't used to be an offence in this country to be a racist, to say racist things. I'm not saying that we want to encourage that, but once you start saying, well, I believe in freedom of speech, but, you've got to draw the line there. That line tends to keep changing until you actually don't really have freedom of speech. And that's the situation that I fear we may be approaching pretty fast, because this Labour government doesn't particularly like freedom of speech. Trevor, very good points. I've got to move on, though, but thank you for an excellent call. Trevor in Edinburgh. Let's go to break now. We'll come back to the phones and your messages after these messages.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is...
Welcome back. Let's go straight back to the phones. Let's talk to Chris in Epsom. Hi, Chris. What would you like to say?
Hi, Kevin. How you doing?
I'm all right, mate. Yeah.
I'll be honest with you. I've had to turn the last hour of the show off. I'm getting I'm spitting nails over Labour. Just so inflamed about it.
Yeah.
I can't believe, after everything they've done, with the old age people's winter allowance,
the winter fuel allowance,
the farmers, everything else that they've done, right? The Chagos Islands, I didn't think they could reach any lower.
But they did today, didn't they? This grooming gang or the rape gang scandal, the abandonment of any kind of inquiry, I think is a disgrace. And it's even more disgraceful, Chris, that they tried to sort of slip it in quietly at the end of this parliamentary session before the break, as if we wouldn't notice, sweep it under the carpet. We're owed some kind of inquiry. 250,000 girls, they think, may be the number that were sexually abused or raped by these awful gangs. And for this government to say, oh, nothing to see here, we won't be looking into this, it's an abrogation of their duty, if you ask me.
It is, Kevin. There's a couple of things. When this started to get traction a few months ago, I actually read the court papers on one of the cases, and it's beyond your worst nightmares.
Yeah, I've got a few messages from people who've also read some. I mean, we can't go into the details, but they're extremely harrowing. What happened to these poor girls? It's hard to say this, but it sounds like a really crass and ridiculous thing to say. But in many of these cases, it was more than just rape. I mean, it was just the most horrific abuse. They were treated like animals. They were treated like animals.
It was torture as well. Anyway, that's why I missed an hour of your show.
I'll forgive you this time, Chris. But don't do that again. You've got to stay tuned. Yeah.
You've done the funniest thing on this channel that I've ever seen.
What was that?
Right. And then I'm going to tell you off about something else.
Okay.
Your Meghan Markle impression.
Meghan Markle. Yeah.
Oh mate.
Yeah. I'm a very serious journalist, Chris. That's why I did that. Yeah.
But I'm not going to let you off the hook.
All right. What have I done wrong?
I spoke to Jodie, and you didn't give it to Jodie.
Well, she's an Everton fan. I know what you mean about Fulham beating the Reds and beating Liverpool on Sunday. It was a privilege to be there, Chris. I'll tell you, what an afternoon that was. But Jodie's a Blues fan, so she was enjoying Fulham's victory as much as I did, almost anyway. But don't worry, I'll find some Liverpool fans to give them a hard time. Don't worry, mate, I will do that. Chris, really good to talk to you. Got to move on, though. The show is dragging on. But thank you very much for an excellent call. It's always great to talk to you. Chris in Epsom. Right, it's that time, I do believe. It's Georgina, the best caller that we have here on Talk. Georgina, welcome to the show. What would you like to say tonight?
It's lovely to talk to you. I've waited a long time to talk to you, and I thought that you looked more like Meghan Markle than Meghan Markle in your dress.
Well, let's not go there. Go on then. You want to talk about people being sent to jail for hurty words? It's not right, is it?
I do want to talk about that. And then I heard about them little girls, 250,000 of them, which doesn't sound a lot when you say it fast. And I really need to just say a few words about these little girls before Go. Right, Jess Phillips should be utterly ashamed of herself. These little girls will never get over this horrendous ordeal, Kevin.
I know.
Rape is something that you live with for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
The way the Labour Party have let these little girls down is a tragedy of biblical proportions.
It is.
And it will not be allowed to be swept under the carpet. This is both mentally and physically damaging for a child. And I'm quite sure, Kevin, if that had been a different story, if the little girl had been an MP's daughter, they would have done something about it very quickly.
I think they're also, Georgina, I mean, they're letting down the victims. many of whom are, they live in constant terror. Some of the victims still tell these stories. They're in the local store or the supermarket, and they bump into the members of the rape gangs who are still here. They never got deported. Some of them are British citizens anyway, so you can't really deport them. But they do their little term in jail and they're released and they're still here. And these girls have to move among them. In their hometowns. I mean, this is preposterous. But it's not only the girls. Of course, Labour horrendously are letting down these girls now. But they're also letting down the entire nation. As a nation, we deserve an inquiry into this.
Well, that's what I was going to say, Kevin. It's very worrying to me and everyone who I've heard talk about this on your show, that why these gross criminal acts have not been investigated to the very best of the police ability. Why isn't the government protecting these little girls? Why are they protecting these Muslim Pakistani rape gangs? Where is the justice for these little girls? Ruins lives.
I know, but the thing is, people talk about this, that horrendously, this could still be going on. A lot of people say it's still going on, and we know why they weren't properly investigated in the first place. It's because the various authorities, the police, the social workers, the local councillors, teachers, all feared to get involved, because they didn't, if they started saying this is down to Muslim Pakistani rape gangs, men, that they might be accused of racism and Islamophobia. So they turned a blind eye to it. That's what happened. That is the crux of the scandal, and they say it is still going on. So this is a national disgrace, and Labour, the Labour government today, let down all of those girls. You're quite right, Georgina, but I think they also let down every last citizen of this nation. We deserve an inquiry into what happened here, and now we're not getting it for this reason. It's politically awkward for Labour, because a lot of the authorities, local authorities where these gross crimes happened, were Labour authorities. And also, of course, Labour don't want to offend the Muslim community because they need their vote. And that is disgusting, if you ask me.
Well, favouritism for the Muslim community by our government.
Well, yeah, because they need the vote. Yeah.
It's causing unrest, Kevin, within the indigenous population of Britain. It's a problem. They've got to get this sorted out. People scream racism and Islamophobia, but it's now the indigenous population of Britain who are being... we're the victim. We are the victim now.
Two-tier justice, Georgina, two-tier justice. We are assailed by it from all angles. We really are. Listen, Georgina, an excellent call as always. I've got to move on, though, but always great to talk to you. Georgina there from London with more of her pearls of wisdom. She's a good caller, isn't she? Let's go to break now. When we come back, Patrick in Coventry, hang around. We'll be with you shortly.
Joe Biden also introduced very protectionist measures to create jobs in America, create green jobs in America. He said, well, government will give you a grant to buy an electric car as long as it's made in the US.
Right.
The same with other green bling and stuff. Well, nobody seemed to, accuse him of sort of closing down world trade. But he was just as protectionist, really, as Donald Trump.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A couple of messages before we go back to the phones. This is Stuart. He says, with Labour cancelling the rape gangs inquiry, does that prove a vote for Labour is a vote for Muslim control? The Muslims click their fingers and Labour obey. There certainly is. Labour are very, very aware of the Muslim vote, let's put it this way. You take Jess Phillips, Angela Rayner. If they didn't have the Muslim vote in their constituencies, both of them would lose their seats. So that's what we're talking about here. Kenny from Edinburgh says, hi Kev, what do you think the Labour government want in return for letting migrants come here and stay forever? Is it their vote once they have citizenship, maybe? I think that would be a plan, yeah. A lot of people believe that they want to make all these people citizens and then get them to vote for them. Wouldn't put it past them. Dorothy in East Kilbride says, of course we should stop paying France. I don't blame the French or the migrants. It is Britain's job to protect our borders. Stop paying for nothing and stop the incentives. So stop paying the French for nothing, stop the incentives for the migrants. It is only a matter of time, says Dorothy, before something big happens in Britain. Let's go back to the phones. Petri Hoskins will be in just a little while to tell you what she's got lined up for you from 10 p.m. until 1 a.m. into the small hours. But first, let's speak to Patrick in Coventry. Hello, Patrick. You want to talk about the asylum seekers? What would you like to say?
Well, two things. I heard a lot about the rape gangs, but there's one thing that many people aren't aware. Most of those cases, when it was being worked on for years and years, Keir Starmer was the chief person involved, and he deliberately covered everything up at the highest level.
I think that's probably a bit over the top, but he was a director of prosecutions for some of the time when the grooming gangs were at work. So it has been levelled against him that he was not vigilant enough about this. He certainly didn't seem to do much for quite a few years when it was well known it was going on. Yes, so yeah, decent point, Patrick, yeah.
And the other thing, in terms of these migrants coming, there seems to be a conspiracy theory going on that certain countries are paying other countries to keep moving them, because by the time they come here, they've moved about 5 to 7 different countries. They're being paid to move along. Not just paying them indirectly to come here.
Do you think it's that, or do you think that they all think that Britain is the promised land with some justification? No. It is that, Patrick. It is that, Patrick. They make their way north on their own volition. They head for Calais because they want to get on these boats. They want to come to Britain because we give them everything. We give them free hotels, 4-star. We give them free food. We give them 45 quid a week, free doctors, free dentists, and free lawyers to fight their case to stay. That's why they come here.
Yeah, but in terms of like where they're coming from, they're going to other countries before they even get to France.
Well, yeah, they should stop in the first country that they get to and claim asylum there if they're genuinely escaping war and torture, which very few of them are. But they're always planning to come to Britain because we are the promised land. It's as simple as that. They don't need to be paid by anyone to do it. They do it because they want to come here, because we'll give them a load of stuff.
Yeah, and then the worst insult to the British people and taxpayers is that they're demanding to go back home for holidays, and the Home Office is giving them documents to do it.
Yeah, I heard about this. Some of them are actually going back. So was it Iraq? Was it or Iran? A couple of asylum seekers went back and then come back on holiday. They go on holiday to their home country and then come back here, which is ludicrous. Patrick, good call. Thank you very much. Good to talk to you. Please call me again. Patrick in Coventry. There. Let's go to Karen in Bournemouth. Hello, Karen. What would you like to say?
Well, good evening, Kev. I'd like to say that...
Is that your dog?
Batty Border Collie, yeah.
What would he like to say? No, seriously, go on, carry on.
Well, the definition of grooming is preparing children for abuse. And this government is actively grooming children because you've got the Education Secretary educating the kids in this critical race theory, so if you're white, you're bad.
Yeah.
You've got the Justice Secretary allowing paedophiles and rapists outside, as well as with the Education Secretary.
Yeah.
They've got 1,200 schools that are called sanctuary schools.
Sanctuary schools.
That they're teaching children that all refugees are good people.
Well, look, what about this school not that far from you? You saw this school in Eastleigh in Hampshire called Norwood Primary School that cancelled Easter. No Easter services for the kids, prominently Christian community. This is a Christian country. No Easter services, no Easter bonnet parade. But the head teacher, a woman called Stephanie Manda, has kindly allowed the kids to celebrate on Easter Refugee Week. There you go.
1,200 of those schools that do that.
Well, they shouldn't really, because this is a Christian country and that's official. We have a state religion.
Religion or not, if you teach young children that all refugees are good people, they're going to be easy to groom.
You know, you're exactly right, Karen. We have a generation, there have actually been generations of left-wing teachers who brainwash kids, and it's going on everywhere. Climate change. Are our children at school, primary and secondary, are they really being taught, you know, both sides of the story when it comes to climate change? Or are they being brainwashed with the fact we've got to do something to save the planet, we're all dying? You know, that's what they're being brainwashed by. And it's a problem. It is a problem. You're right, Karen. Karen, good call. Thank you very much for ringing. Please call me again. Karen in Bournemouth there. I think this might be the last call, but hopefully it'll be a very good one. Let's talk to Simon in Suffolk.
Yeah, I don't believe it's going to be good, Kev.
Yeah, all right. You're on the rack now, mate. It better be good. No, seriously. What would you like to say?
Just about this Lucy Connolly thing.
Yep.
I've read your page of what gets put up on the TV, and she keeps being called clearly racist. I don't understand it because she doesn't mention race. Migrants are all different races: black, white, brown, all over the world.
Yeah, I mean, look, what she posted on Twitter, I think it was.
Yeah.
It was ill-advised to say the least.
It was a terrible thing to say, but she didn't mention race.
Yeah, but except what she said was something along the lines of mass deportations, get rid of all these migrants and set fire to the asylum seeker hotels. And she said, if that makes me a racist, so be it.
Yeah, but saying that doesn't make her a racist, because there was white people in their hotels. There was all different colours in them hotels.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, asylum seekers.
You had to comment on the race.
Yeah, I get that.
All migrants now, are we racist against every migrant, no matter what race they are?
The thing is, Simon, this spectre of racism gets the current regime, the Labour Party and the left-wing judges into apoplexy. You know, oh, is it racist? All right, go to jail for 3 years. Nobody in this country should go to jail for stupid things they write on social media.
Definitely not. Definitely not.
That's what's wrong about her, and she wasn't the only one. Sending these middle-aged women to jail for stupid tweets and stupid posts on Facebook, which we don't approve of. We don't condone what they said, but they shouldn't be in prison. They're not a threat to the community, and that's what's wrong about it. It's authoritarian. Our government's response to those summer riots was a disgrace. It was a disgrace. It was a perversion of justice. Two-tier justice, Simon. You know what I'm saying. Simon, it was a good call. Thank you very much. Please call me again. Simon in Suffolk. And Petri Huskin is in the studio. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm not bad, not bad.
So I'm going to be looking at these digital IDs this evening and into the morning. That's going to be the phone-in, is do we really want these? And I'm I'm with you. Because I'm looking at the China's social credit system, and I want to talk about that as well. That's on a digital ID. Labour, when Tony Blair first mooted this, they wanted, do you remember this, 700 different pieces of information. And I remember doing phone-ins back in the day going, what are the 700 bits of information?
This is about